Mike, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, man.
Thank you for agreeing to do this. We have a mutual friend, Alex Reardon, who will be listening to this, who continues to introduce me to awesome folks. And so glad we connected. We connected because you're running a really interesting business, Vortex Companies. You're down in Houston. But before we kind of get into that and all that is trenchless technology, where'd you come from and how does one find themselves getting into the trenchless technology business?
I can tell you on my wall I have a picture of my great grandfather Paul Vellano, who laying a water main in 1925 in upstate New York, where I was from. When my family came here, the Vellano side of the family was very involved in civil infrastructure, water, sewer. When my great grandfather and he had two kids, Anthony and John. They both went to World War II. One went to Europe, one went to the Pacific, and they both came back and started Vellano Brothers Contracting, which was then turned into Anjo Construction. And they also had a big supply business and a trench safety business that they built over time. So my earliest memories were working for my family, were being in infrastructure and being in around excavators, and the opposite of what I'm doing now, which is trenchless technology. So Vellano Brothers was the supply arm. It was around for 70 years. It was acquired by a plumbing wholesale company in upstate New York, and it was my first job was working for Vellano Brothers, being around this industry. And I think my father said, go to college and get out of upstate New York and learn something that's different. We didn't have a lot of college grads in our family, and then I actually left college early to go back and help start a yard in Boston, and grew up around entrepreneurs, a family of entrepreneurs, all focused on this space. And when I left the family business to go do something on my own. Trenchless was where I landed. My family had supplied pipe and other things to trenchless contractors, so I had a good footing. And but in terms of involved in a lot of different businesses, sit on some boards and invest, and like to mentor people that were in my spot, 7-8 years ago. But I've dedicated my whole life to this industry.
That's awesome. All right. So you leave working with your family. You said you were going to go off and do your own opportunity. I want to talk about the opportunity, but let's just kind of define, I think, what does trenchless mean to you? So for somebody that's never heard of this, what does the trenchless industry actually mean and entail?
Yeah. So in 1976, the Ohio River in Cleveland burst into flames, and the EPA initiated something called the Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Act was meant to eliminate watershed and tier 1 outfalls and figure out ways to prevent, water treatment plants and sewer systems from dumping into, and really it became a mandated legal action by the federal government to go around and get municipalities to fix their sewer systems. So for years, they had this, the federal government could go in and sue the city of Dallas. Well, they just sued the city of Houston and filed a consent decree, a consent order that said they have to spend so much money to fix their system. And then the city comes back and it goes to a federal judge, and they negotiate this, what eventually becomes a consent decree. And the consent decree says, you have to fix your system. You have to pay for it. You can get some grant money or raise some bonds and do that kind of thing. But you have to spend, we think it's going to cost $8 billion. The city says it's going to spend $2 billion. And then the federal judge says it's $5 billion to get into compliance. As a result of that, a lot of that work didn't happen for years because there weren't enough low cost alternatives to really do it. And Situform was a company out of Europe that out of the UK that invented a product called in situ form, and it was a cured in place liner. There were other technologies like grouting and slip lining, but cured in place is really a trenchless technology that has taken our industry from a small, one-off to the city of Houston does 80% of their rehabilitation. The footage of rehabilitation that they do in a year is done through trenchless technologies. So trenchless technologies mean that you're going in without excavating. And some trenchless products they aren't trench free, they are trenchless. You actually have to do some excavations to insert your pipe or pull your pipe in, like pipe bursting or slip lining. But cured in place or pipe bursting or slip lining or coatings are rehabilitating or renewing that asset. And cured in place lining has been around for now, since the 70s, and it's starting to earn 100-year design lives. It used to be looked at as a rehabilitation method, like angioplasty in a heart. This is you're actually renewing and creating a long-term asset. We line roof stacks of vertical structures, buildings. We do, 60. We just finished a 16-foot diameter tunnel in Michigan. There's really no end to and the opportunity to save environmentally is huge, and in terms of disrupting an asset or disrupting a neighborhood or a thoroughfare. When we're in your neighborhood, it means it means we're going to be in and out, and that's and trenchless technology is really in terms of how a city or an engineer decides how they're going to fix a pipe. That's it's become a first option in a lot of places.
So I understand this. The whole world has been building plumbing systems and piping systems for centuries now. I'm going to ask you a question about how old is really old, but you're basically going in saying, look, there's all this stuff already in place. Rather than go rip it all out and dig the ground out or tear buildings apart, we have tools and processes and products that can go inside of the current pipe and almost create a new pipe within a pipe. Fair?
Yeah. So exactly. So using cured in place is one method where you take a felt liner, you impregnate it with resin, and then you turn that liner inside out, inside of the pipe like a sock, and that is then cured with either through a thermocure, which is hot water or air, or cured through UV technology, and it as it expands and bonds to the hose pipe, as you add temperature to it, it becomes cured in place, and it becomes a pipe inside of that pipe. But everything we do, there has to be a pipe, there has to be an existing manhole, there has to be a structure for us to do what we do. We're not putting new pipe in the ground like directional drilling, which is technically in a lot of ways trenchless. It's just that's not something we do. All of our processes, we have to have an existing asset, and in this country, and in a lot of the world rebuilt itself in the 1950s, and there's a lot to fix, still a lot to fix.
And are most of your customers government contractors, or a lot of them like a private developer that might go into an old building and they're redoing it, or what's the breakout between kind of public customers to private customers?
The mandates I mentioned before with the Clean Water Act and these lawsuits have created a huge amount of demand in the municipal space, and this business has really cut its teeth. Working for cities and in places that have old infrastructure. We do a lot of work for refineries and breweries and the private side is real. The private developer side is really a big emerging market for us. We have property managers, a lot of the big engineering firms like AECOM and CH, they're managing facilities. Will go in and do roof stacks for them or sell product to our customers to do that kind of work. But yeah, it's really focused on, 85% of our business is in the municipal space.
I'm gonna try and ask this the right way, but like, how old is some of this stuff, and how have things changed over time? So I'd imagine if you're going into something, there's probably plumbing systems around that were done in the late 1800s, early 1900s that we're still using today. And then maybe paint a picture, like if you were building a new building today, how much things have changed in the way we design these plumbing systems, so that, you know, a listener that's never thought about this could go, man, what's underneath the ground and what we can't see it's amazing that we still use it today.
Yeah. So a big part of, when you, especially jurisdictionally, or geographically, I should say, like in a place like Boston, we lined a pipe in front of Mass General that was a brick sewer that I think was hand laid in the early 1900s. And when you went into this pipe, it was a work of art. It was, there's some Italian brick mason or Irish brick mason, 100 years ago that just was building. I mean, the condition was amazing. The things that were gone in it were a natural process of sewer corrosion eating away concrete. So we went in and lined that pipe, and over time, you could see water mains that were put in the ground that they ran right through the pipe. We had to line around and try to fix. An older system, it's chaos, and in some newer systems, like in places in the Southeast or here, they've experienced such massive population growth that they have to increase the treatment side of their plan, or rehabilitate the way they collect all their sewers. So what you're doing in those situations is you're basically sealing the pipe and keeping the flow of material to get to that treatment process. Or in some cases, it's a combination where open cut is doing traditional open cut construction to increase the size of that pipe is the only, or building tunnels or doing things to help support that. But stabilizing your system in that case could be the function of using older pipe technology that didn't work in some places. There's a lot of clay pipe in this country. There's a lot of AC pipe. There's a lot of, which is asbestos concrete. And most of the water mains in the northern part of this country are AC water mains, which is kind of crazy. But when we go in and rehabilitate, it could be a combination of both. Up north, especially in older northern cities, they had combined systems. And combined systems means that storm and sewer are converging in larger pipes, and they've spent a lot of time trying to separate those to try to change the way that these systems operate. In places like Boston, and they call them CSO, combined system overflows. They've put together large projects to try to change those dynamics. But the configuration, most of the changes that we're seeing are about trying to anticipate capacity. And what I think when you think about highways, it's, if you've been to Austin, you know that highway was not built. I-35 was not built with the expectation that Austin was going to be one of the fastest growing places in the world, and the same thing goes for its sewer system. It's over time, the population can't handle cars. The system underground probably isn't going to be able to handle what it's being dealt with. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. And in a situation like Austin, the size is the size, right? So is there anything Trenchless can do in a situation like Austin where the population is growing so much, or is that where you actually do need to dig a trench and put a new pipe in the ground?
Yeah, so in Austin, there's some really cool stuff happening in our industry. There's a big customer of ours just picked up a really large tunneling project up there, one of the bigger tunneling jobs I think that have bid this year. And what they're doing is something we don't do, but they're just tunneling with big shafts going under the city instead of going through, the way that something would be built initially. They're essentially tunneling underneath everything to create more space, or to create a huge utility instead of going back. And then the conversion, they'll relocate a bunch of utilities to flow into that tunnel. But that's a in a place like Austin, there's no other way to do it. Even if they wanted to dig, they would have to relocate 1 million people. So they have to get creative, and they have to understand that there are ways out there that are risky. I mean, that project there's only a few companies in the world that could do that job. But that's how a lot of great things are created, right? By having a significant problem and Austin's got a lot of rock, and it's not, that's going to be a very cool project, and it's going to save people. People see a lot of money being spent on a capital project like that. It was done in a way that was a huge amount of planning and a huge amount of research and finding the right technology to eliminate to improve a lot of lives.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people back in the 50s really thought about how big these cities could get and how big the homes that we would build would get and the amount of resources we would use. I mean, just the average footprint of the average person is so much greater. People have pools, 6 showers, a jacuzzi, all these 6 bathrooms. It's just a lot more stuff being used.
Yeah. Yeah, you look at the Big Dig. I think that highway was designed to carry like 60,000 people a day or something. It's just millions of people in Boston. So put it underground.
My entire drive to Austin is predicated around when I'm going to hit 35. I mean, there's no other thing to think about. It's hell if you miss it.
That's what people say they're going to fly to Austin. I'm like, well, you're going to hit the worst part of traffic.
All right. I guess we can this will blend, but are there geographic, if we just stick to America, are there areas in the country where your business does better because of climate, topography, anything like that? Or is it kind of evenly distributed no matter where you are?
Well, so we have a product and a service business, and we operate them we operate them separately. Vortex products and Vortex services both operate a little differently. Services, obviously, we're sending crews out to perform a lot of trenchless work in certain geographies. We have service locations in the Northwest, in Colorado, Texas, mainly Houston and Dallas, the Southeast in Georgia and Florida and in South Carolina, and then we have a location in New Jersey and Maine, and then we have another technology which is a large diameter technology that those crews do work all over the U.S. But we typically stay closer to our hubs on the service side. On the product side, we sell product all over the world. You name it. We have licensees and for several technologies. We sell product in Australia, Asia. We have a product office in Munich, where we sell all of our products, and we own a service business in Hanover, Germany that does a lot of the things that we sell, and looking to expand in Europe now. And then, the business really started organically by finding the right kind of combination of products and services. Some we used our service business as a test kitchen to go out and install and try new things in the field with geopolymers and other products. And on the service side, we started, as a bypass company in a lot of different ways to get and partnered with. I would have an old guy that I worked with in this industry would come to me and say, hey, I'm interested in doing something in the pipe bursting industry or something in sewer robotics, and we would figure out a way to give them some skin in the game, and we would operate it and build and then once we built some of these businesses organically, we realized we had an opportunity go out and acquire some businesses, and so I think I took that question in a different direction. But we geographically, how we don't really we look at opportunity. We're on the product side, we sell all over anywhere we can get a product, we'll sell it. On the service side, we're really focused on areas that we have a hub and have a base. And if there are some areas where they're going to pay us to go there, they'll pay us to go to the moon to line a pipe. We'll go there.
But is there anything that has to do with like weather, climate, topography, soil that would say, because of these type of climates or these type of geographical regions, there's a lot more plumbing infrastructure that needs to be fixed, say like in the Northeast versus like a Texas? Or is that kind of not something that really matters?
I think soil conditions and layout, density is obviously, population density is going to mean there's more sewer or water. There's also places like Houston and the Southeast that are, the sewers aren't quite as deep, and pipe bursting is a better technology to support in those parts of the world. Population density is the age of infrastructure is important. A lot of our technology we can install in colder weather. We don't have in the Northeast and colder climates that you actually, they have a moratorium on paving roads. So there's certain things you can't do with traditional remove and replace or open cut. So population density, soil conditions, they do play a factor in what we do or what we sell in those markets.
All right, I want to talk about how you built this. We kind of laid the groundwork for, kind of what you're doing. I think it's just really cool, how you built this. So Vortex is a combination of lots of companies. Did you start by buying a business, or kind of how did it kind of start from a pure building a business standpoint?
So, when I left my family business, which was, an incredible experience being around all of my, there was Vellano Brothers was 3 brothers on my father's side and 2 brothers on my grandfather's side and 2 on my great uncle's side. They were all entrepreneurs, all involved in different stuff, and learned a ton from them, but definitely wanted to try to do something on my own. And I had a short stop at a company called IPR, which was owned by a private equity group, and learned a lot about the business there, and then left to start something. I knew that part of the reason I left the family business was I didn't want a boss again. And when I went to IPR, I learned that I didn't want. I wanted to do something on my own, and I had a lot of people that it was a different kind of like I had. It wasn't. You learn that at first it's like, well, I want to be in. Well, it's not really about being in charge. It's about doing something that you believe in and putting a platform together that I thought was the right kind of approach to this industry. So when I left, I started a bypass business, and then really over time, having seen the way my family built their business, and having developed all these relationships over time with end users and engineers and contractors and suppliers, realized that I had built up a pretty good network of people, and some of those guys were looking for opportunities like I was. Just they wanted to, they had a product or they had a business that made sense, and over time we started with the bypass company, then started looking at different technologies from Europe, because most of our infrastructure technology comes from Scandinavia and from Germanic countries and developed Europe and that kind of stuff. And took on some. So I woke up one day and had some products and had a service business, and realized that it was time, maybe to start thinking about doing a couple of acquisitions. So we acquired a coatings business called Quadex. Then we acquired a small company out in Colorado. Then we built QLS, which was Quadex Lining Systems, organically to apply products that Quadex manufactured. And I'm not trying to confuse you. We did this really fast, and then we one day in 2000.
Stop for 2 seconds and keep going. But when did this all start? And then even to where you are right now in the story, like how many span of years are we talking about?
We're talking about like 14 to 15.
Okay. Yeah. All right. For some people, this is a lifetime. This isn't a 1-year deal. So you were doing about a business a month.
So in 15, we woke up and said, hey, we got to get everybody together. We need to consolidate our sales approach, and we need to figure out how we're going to take this thing to market. And what we're doing is, we've acquired these businesses. They had really good operational people. They had really good technical people. And in some cases, they had salespeople. And we need to focus the salespeople on selling. We need to focus the technical people on supporting them. And then the operations people, however they need to support, A and B. So is that through going out and teaching someone how to use a cutter? Is that through designing a bypass? Is that through designing a liner? Or however. So at that point, it was I think it was like 4:30 in the morning in our conference room. We were middle of a busy week. We met to say, hey, what are we going to talk about at this sales meeting we have? And we're working like 100 hours a week, and we sat in my office, which at that point was we were renting 2 rooms from a engineering company that was a mentor and a great guy in Houston. And I said, we got to come up with an outward facing sales organization, and then these are all going to become brands behind it. And we're not ready to consolidate everything at the time. So Vortex Infrastructure Products was created at that meeting, and that was how we were going to sell to the market. So Vortex was going to become a solutions platform that when somebody came, we interfaced with an engineer, we would present the platform. And for the sake of that meeting, they wanted to talk about fixing a large pipe or a small or a service lateral or bypass. And then the salesperson would be able to pull, if it was a technical meeting, they would pull that technical resource out of the business. We called them product managers. And if the salesperson had a lead where somebody wanted us to come out and do the work, they would pull the operations person, and we would go and attack those opportunities. So Vortex Infrastructure became, we had like everyone's journey, we had a couple of partners we got rid of, and we consolidated our business. And in 2016, Vortex became Vortex Holdings, which was we consolidated all of the ownership together into one holding company, because we had all these. We looked at the cap table and we looked at the businesses we had, and we said, "Shit, we have 9 different entities that we need to roll into one." And we rolled. So when we consolidated them, everyone at that point had started. This is a year later, had started to identify us as Vortex. So. Vortex Holdings, and then about a year later, we had a couple of really, we started at that point, we were really building our business organically. We had done a couple of small deals. And at that point, we started talking to our bank, and they were like, at some point you're going to have to bring a partner on if you want to do, I know what your plan looks like, and, we're not going to let you. We're probably not going to borrow. None of us had trust funds in the beginning. In the beginning, when we had when we had, there were times where I think I financed 12 F-150s personally. There's like 18 Ford letters coming to my house. My wife's like, what is going on? I mean, she's a huge part of my story. But that becomes like a pretty, and then we have jobs that we're looking at going, I can do this job for you, but can you pay me early? Or we had one customer that paid us for a couple $1 million of material early, and that cash flowed the business for like 90 days. It was just big. There were things as you go back and you look at the story, you're like, man, I can't believe I flew that close to the sun. But those things worked, and we had the risk profile to handle it. And there were times where we had to put money in the account to make payroll, and we plowed forward, and the business, and then back to that moment. So the bank, I didn't think I wanted to take on a partner, but we found the right one. Platform Partners here in Houston, they're a perpetual fund and invest in everything and have been great partners to us. And so just because we like to do things painfully, when they closed on, when they invested in us, we also simultaneously closed on our first large acquisition, VAC Vision, out of Tampa, and closed our credit agreement in the same day. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving. That was a fun day. But November. So yeah, we and from there we put our heads down, and we acquired businesses every year. We got a few we'll do this year, a steady diet of products and services, and I think we bought 4 companies during COVID, which was, we kind of took the opposite approach of the rest of the world. But it's been a wild ride. Probably forgot some things in between.
I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. All right, so you started with a business, and then you kind of maybe organically started a few, you bought a few, but give me a sense, like how big of a company were you kind of by the end of 2016 when you were nearing this desire to take on private equity? How much revenue across everything?
30 to 40.
Okay.
30 to 40, someone.
And was this a hodgepodge of friends and family investors, company, like owner financing when you'd buy businesses? Like, how did you kind of finance your way to 40 million in revenue?
No, we had, it was a combination of having some really good customers that took care of us on the working capital side. And we went and we had a banking relationship with Regions Bank. They did a great job for us. We did our first couple of deals. Did our first couple of deals actually buying out our old partner, which was the first deal we did with them, and then going out and buying our first couple of businesses and giving us a little bit of breathing room with our first line of credit to help us build this thing.
All right. Well, I think your story of, one lesson I just learned is you don't actually need to raise money if you can get customers to prepay multi-million-dollar invoices ahead of time. You actually...
That was unplanned. That was just, it's just direction and movement.
Yeah, your story of financing 12 Ford trucks. I used to have this line on Grasshopper that when you called it, it would be like, for 1, press accounting, for 2, press acquisitions, for 3, press HR. It was a one-person company, and every line routed towards me. But you got to play the game to build a company, and there's a lot of things that happen that they don't teach you in business school.
Yeah, I don't know that I would do it exactly the same, but it worked. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to be willing to be an entrepreneur. You have to be willing to take risks that a lot of people won't. That's why when you hear about businesses failing, if you've been through it, you're like, man, it's not, you're always a couple of steps away from something that doesn't, that could really affect your future. It's definitely not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it, I think. But
my buddy Brent says that small business is just like loosely functioning disasters, and some people can keep it together long enough to get to the other side. But I've really never met a small business owner that described anything remotely different from that.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Okay, so is it fair to say that when you're buying these businesses, you're not letting each business kind of operate with its own kind of culture and its own people and its own brand name? Everything you buy eventually rolls up under the Vortex brand, or do you operate as a holdco where everything can operate separately from each other?
No, we believe in integration. We also believe that the customer. We also believe in the customer interface is important. So, there's a lot of companies out there, large platform companies that will go in and say, oh, in the first year, the font of your logo changes. In year two, you become a so-and-so company. And then by year three, we tend to go in and we want to create enough culture and enough engagement in the business for them to make that decision. There's a guy, I can give you a couple of quick examples, like VacVision in the Southeast. The owner of that business came to me, or the seller, and he now runs our services group. He's president of our services group. Wes is a great friend, and one of the first large acquisitions we did right after we brought Platform on, and he's like, I hate the name. VacVision's a terrible name. I want to be Vortex today. I'm like, all right, well, we got to work through the customer stuff. That was different. In Maine, we bought a company called Ted Berry that was a multi-generation business, and Matt Timberlake is actually one of our culture leaders at this business, and helped develop our culture, which is I can tell you about in a moment, but. He was one that surprised me. He came back quicker than we thought and said, you know what, this business is ready to move on to its next stage, and calling it Vortex is. So all of our service businesses are actually called Vortex now. They're all integrated. They're all on the same platform, which is I'm very proud of. We see a lot of companies where they do operate under that structure, and in some cases it works. But I think having them all integrated and having them on one system and seeing and bleeding orange is important to developing the right kind of story, and I think a story that we're building. I grew up in a very traditional family business, and you had your name on the building, and Vellano was a proud moment to see on your trucks and everything else. We still think about Vortex that way. We think about it a little differently, less, we try to build as much of a team environment as we can. We're not perfect all the time, but we have a corporate culture that's built on this premise of winning big. We actually trademarked it. So we win big we hired a group to come in and help us sort of capture and harness who we are. We're all pretty hard charging guys and gals that want to win. So winning big is what came out of that. And you see it around our office, and you see it on a lot of you'll see it when you go to our website. It's a big part of who we are.
I love it. All right. I want to get back to culture, but I want to real quick on 2016. So you kind of meet with Regions Bank, and you kind of have the epiphany that we need to raise new money. Obviously, you had worked at a private equity backed company before, but I think this is important for a lot of people to hear. You had, let's just call it, bootstrapped your way to 40 million in revenue. That's a feat of its own. But what mattered to you? Like, how did you start this process? Did you already know who you were going to go to? Did you interview lots of people? Like, what mattered? And ultimately, how did you make the decision to work with who you worked with?
I think that there's a couple of important quotes that buying or building, or obviously, we looked back and said, could we do this again? Could we go out and bootstrap it in ways where we're taking the right kind of work or working with the right partners? And the reality is, we're in a municipal pay cycle, and at some point, you start to create a situation where it would have been hard for us to raise the capital and do the things that we were going to do on our own. We probably could have done it, but knowing what I know now, I grew up in an environment where I didn't really understand what kind of money was out there. If I knew what I knew now, I don't know. At the end of the day, we found essentially exactly what we were looking for in Platform, who was a company that invested, 51-49. They weren't institutionally backed. I didn't want a company that, had a huge amount of pension fund. And Platform's a lot like a family office. And I had met them when my family's business was for sale, to try to help them out. And they gave me a pitch that stayed with me. And then when Region said, you should look, we went and talked to a few different private equity groups, and Brad Morgan at Platform, I called him up and said, hey, I think we're really moving this train pretty fast, and your structure, makes sense. And there's an opportunity for some of us here that I didn't think we thought we would have as quickly as we might. And I think we can get this thing to, I think we have a path to get this thing to $400 or $500 million in the next 7 or 8 years, or 10 years. And, he believed in us, and it was a much quicker and very painless process. Diligence is relative, right? But, I didn't want the traditional group, in the sense that that it became, we're still needed to be nimble. Platform has allowed us to do that and go out and build a great business. And, we still have a lot to accomplish to get to those numbers, but, we're at least more than halfway there. So that's good.
Was there something, and if the answer's it's private, you can't share, but was there something that stood out? You said that they weren't institutional, which I can guess means they didn't come with all these extra red tape things that institutions now require. But is there a certain way they're structured? You kind of mentioned perpetual funding that was just this resonated with me a lot more than your typical term sheet.
Yeah, I think their plan with all their businesses to hold on to them as long as it takes. And if they're growing a great business, the one thing I liked about them is they hadn't sold a lot of businesses. Their plan was to hold and build great companies. And, by being that there really isn't, a charter and a fund, and they have to move it in 7 to 10 years. And if, it's perpetual. And we raised debt, they raised debt for the deal. And it was a great opportunity to come in and break, in a structure like that, you can pivot and you can do some things. It's not all about, you're not in a sales mode the minute you walk in day one. You're building a great business the same way we were before. They also, offered a lot of things that I hadn't been around. They have a great culture, and they had the ability to support all the things that I needed from as a guy who understood the business but didn't understand everything I needed to understand about business. They've taught me a lot about that in a way that I don't know that I deal with the leadership there. In some cases, in smaller groups, you're dealing with an analyst or somebody that isn't necessarily a guy that's or a gal that's going to help you understand. It's just a number, So yeah, they're true. they are partners, and it's been a learning experience, for me being a bull sometimes, but at the same time, really allowing us to do a lot of the things that have made this company or make this company a great company.
Yeah. When you team up with them and call it 2016, 2017, obviously you kind of mentioned you had a goal of getting to, $500 million in revenue. And they're a perpetual kind of fund. It's not a blank check, but is the relationship kind of, hey, as long as, these are deal accretive opportunities and we're investing in good opportunities, we're going to continue to be there. Because you've bought a lot over the last 6 years since you were with them. Like, how does that relationship look? You call them whenever a new deal comes in and say, do you like it or do you not? Or, how does it work?
Our deals are all in since 2000, since our first acquisition of Quadex, we've never hired an investment banker. We've never used any outside resources. It's all been industry related, arm's length, in some cases customers, people that we've had the opportunity to work with for a period of time. So we really understand the companies that we're buying a little differently than most. But the business we acquired in Germany, and I've known the owner of that business since 2011 or 2012. We've been around each other for a long time. And same for the U.S. And Backvision was one of Quadex's oldest customers. So we were able to build, which is really the riskiest side of diligence, right? Like you said before, the culture and the personalities and the people that are going to carry these businesses forward. That's the hardest part of buying a deal. You got to look for traps and you got to look for the financial side. But if they're going to come in and not fit into your culture and who you are, and our model is to take people from those businesses and really ramp them up and put them in larger positions or different positions, or get the most out of get the most out of what makes them great at what they do. And that's integration. Is, like I said before, I'm proud of the fact that they're called Vortex. I see companies all the time when they have there's 9 different names on a card. So from that, so then once we know that that's a reality, and once we can have that connectivity with a seller that's just like, this is the right thing, and we want you to be on the cap table, we want you to reinvest, and we want you to be a part of what we're doing going forward. That's when we have that conversation, and it's you always got to make the numbers work. So we and early on, one of the biggest, if I could go back and write and like you said, how you cash flowed the business or how you went to regions, those are all things that I would do some combination of. I don't know if I would do it exactly the same, but I would. But when we started in 2016, we brought a general counsel on, and I remember a platform like, you're a small company. Why do you need it? Well, we've never hired a banker, because I hired a guy that understood M&A and came on as a partner and helped us, really intimately got involved in all these deals. We hired a young financial guy out of the Naval Academy that came on and did all of our modeling. So we had all this stuff sort of internally, and then we could evaluate the business from an industry perspective. And that was really a big part of our secret sauce. And for the most part, platform has helped hone in all those things and help us make the right financial decisions when we buy these companies. But we do Vortex, as a standalone. We have a lot of the infrastructure to go out and get those deals done, which has been another big part of our success, and platform being there to help validate that stuff is sort of the cherry on top.
How many businesses have you acquired since 2016?
And we've done a couple of small asset deals, but it's if you include them, it's 11 companies.
All right. Let's just spend some time on this, and then I've got some other questions and then some fun ones, but nothing crazy. I just you've mentioned integration like a lot. I can clearly see it's really important. And you kind of said on each acquisition, you kind of let that acquisition dictate how the integration might take place. Is there like a 90-day, 1-year playbook, or something like skills that you've learned over time? I guess if somebody was listening that might be integrating companies and was like, man, these are some lessons that I never would have learned, or things that you've learned the hard way. Like, what are the top 3 things to integrating a company, or something to that degree?
Yeah, I think when integration gets super generic, it starts to get less. Your success rate goes down. Understanding the business that you're integrating, understanding the personalities, knowing who is really critical to that business is the key to integration. And then I think you take it down a notch and you look at the tools that you use, you look at the technology, you look at the systems, you look at where they operate, you look at, there's certain businesses we've gone in, and, you're at the opening, the first day, and you find out that there's 5 brothers and cousins working on a crew, or you find out, you have to understand the dynamics of a business and understand how important that crew is to the revenue and how you effectively integrate them in. And then and then timing is the third piece. Like, do you look at looking at the first 90 days or the first 6 months? There's death and taxes. Like, there's certain things. Your insurance is going to be, when your policies run out, you're going to be on our insurance. We're going to bond, because that's just the way the liability works. The money's going to come to Houston. There's a few things that are just basic things that you get out of the way, but taking them off their system and doing a huge shock to who they are and how they operate has never been a real. So the timeline is relative. I think, depending on how some guys come to us and say, look, I just know how to put pipe in the ground. I don't know how to do any of this stuff. We're going to go on the system immediately. And that sounds easier than it is. Sometimes you sort of have to take a step back. And then there's some where we adopt some of the things that they do, because they do it so well. The way they schedule, or the way that they look at the business. So, I think it's really understanding the business, understanding how the way that they operate affects the key people and that are critical to that business. And then, and really making it clear what the things that are going to change day one are, which are really money and insurance and maybe a few other things, payroll, that kind of shit, AP. And then the last piece really being focused on developing the right timeline. We've gotten some, most of the size businesses we acquire are, some are on a more sophisticated system, but a lot of them are on QuickBooks or on something where it's, it's amazing the size business you can run on QuickBooks. QuickBooks is a really great product. I know, sometimes I wish we were on QuickBooks. It can do things that are, super expensive ERP can't.
Yeah, it's like 2 of the most successful technologies of all time are still Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel. Like, same with, I put QuickBooks in that category. There's really been, it's just amazing.
We still have people we integrate this great construction tracking software, and it's just like, I can't, I'm going to do it. I'm going to track everything on Excel. I'm like, well, it's kind of doing the same thing. It's just like, well, this just makes me comfortable. Like, well, this is where it's got to get. But at the end of the day, you realize that that's actually those guys that are doing it that way are your best project managers. They don't need a tool to make them better. They're just good at doing what they do.
Do you care at all if the leaders of the businesses stay on post close? Is that a deal term, deal by deal, or is it something that's important to you one way or the other?
It's very important to us. It's important in the businesses that we look at. I mean, in this day and age, leadership and people are critical to running a business. I don't. I think one of the things we look for in acquisitions are, how many we've acquired a business that where two members of that business are now running separate divisions and have someone on the leadership team. Dave, who runs our New Jersey office, and Sean, who runs Maine, and we have. There's more to come. I think we have an incredible amount of talent in our business. When we look at acquisitions, I think looking at how their leadership engages with their team and how they talk about their team and who they are, how they get along with their partners, all that stuff is to integration. I don't. There's been a few technologies that we've acquired, some IP. And in that case, it was really about the technology and less about the people. Keeping and preserving and making sure that they're a right fit to be involved in what we're doing is important.
All right, I just want to ask a couple questions on Europe. You've got businesses over there. This is maybe more to just, you're the first person I've had on since kind of Russia, Ukraine, Europe has started that owns business over in Europe. But have things changed? Is what we're hearing over here the same as what's actually going on over there? Like, from your perspective, maybe I'll start with how big is the Russia situation on Europe from your view right now?
I think it depends on where you are in Europe. Which just determines how you're affected. But I think everyone is affected in some way. Germany, where our office is, Germany is definitely they've changed. They had a policy since the end of World War II. They're scaling their military up, and the cost of fuel and the cost of gas and stainless steel, which is a big part of our robotics business, is up 250% over the last couple of weeks because a third of it comes out of the Ukraine. And then there's supply and there's the ability. The price is up, but the price is up because of supply and demand. It's not still a capitalist country. It's definitely and I think the way that countries like Poland and Hungary and bordering countries are dealing with it are different than Germany. Germany is still, in the areas of Germany that we operate, are still a long way away from the Ukraine. I think it's really affecting them more at the gas pump and in terms of the cost of food and things that really do affect our employees and people and are affecting us here. So I think in a lot of similar ways that we're affected, Germany's being affected now. Having to figure
out. We talked the whole episode about commercial. Does your technology do well in residential? Is it scalable to your typical single family home with a slab leak or something like that, or are you focused more on commercial?
Yeah, we sell we private label products. We have robotics technology that work in residential and a big part of our business is in-house lining, where you're lining vertical stacks or you're basically lining up to the wax flange of a structure. There's a huge residential side to our business, especially up to the property line or up to the clean out. You call up a plumber. Chances are they have a coat miller or they have some type of trenchless or repipe product or coatings product, there's a good chance we might be in that cycle somewhere.
All right, I'm going to end it on three things that you kind of brought up that I think are important. It's a lot of fun to talk about building big businesses and everything else, but you just kind of said three things that I think a lot of people should think about, and they're lighthearted. But you said doers are the lifeblood of a business. Executives have it easy. What did you mean by that? Besides what you said.
Yeah, it's never so true in our industry. I mean, we have guys going into sewer pipes. Our team is built on people that have our executive team is built on guys and gals that, some Vortex was their first job, to people that started businesses in this space, to people in HR that came from totally different worlds, and everybody puts 110% at this business. But the people in the field, especially during COVID, that sacrifice and live in hotels, and that's the lifeblood of our business. We don't have a business without those guys and gals.
Is there anything, I have to ask this question because when I think of some of what you do, I think of Micro and like Dirty Jobs, and he's on this American campaign that we need more people to be doing this, and we need it to be attractive again, and for people to want to get into this industry. Is labor tight? Like, is there anything you're seeing or things that you think about when you're like, man, we need so many more people coming in? Or how do you think about labor maybe over the next 20 years, especially in your industry?
I mean, there should be an infomercial out there. I mean, there's kids that are going to get their masters in teaching, don't really understand how much money they can make, and I think in certain industries in this world, and this is kind of it's fairly recession proof. We're dealing with capital funds that are pretty hard to access once they're allocated, and we're dealing with a real need, and labor is just really challenging. I don't think anyone in our industry is I think everybody in our industry has dealt with shortages and trying to find people and what could be done if they had enough people, how to train, how to consolidate. And we have a huge gap from the age of 13 to the age of 18 where no young men or women are being trained. There's no vocational schools anymore. There's no way to get them educated to understand. I think there's people that go to school because they think, I was probably one of them. I shouldn't have gone to college. It wasn't meaningful. I love Ole Miss, but
go Ole Miss, baby.
National champs.
I know.
You sit there and you think about the things that and how we drive someone to. Some people shouldn't own a house. Some people shouldn't have a credit card. Some people shouldn't go to college. I think, and labor is going to continue to be a challenge until we figure out how to educate people on what exists out there. But going into a sewer, which a lot of people that work in these offices and back to the doers, like they don't ever have to get into a sewer. I mean, we don't. I like going out and seeing our guys in the field and walking job sites, but man, it's a tough job, but at the end of the day, a lot of them are creating a good life for their family and working hard doing it. But back to the labor side, it's until we can sort of restructure. It's going to be how do you airplane mechanics or truck drivers. I think we need 80,000 truck drivers in this country to support. Supply chain isn't all about inavailability. It's about there's one driver for every 80 loads available right now. How do you get stuff from point A to point B? And we dealt with it during COVID. We couldn't get containers here. We had some real strain, that affected one container not getting here could affect 5 or 6 different businesses in the way that a pipe is and I don't know that is it because we're short staffed? Is it because people don't want to work? I don't know. So.
Okay. I commend you. And again, it's been another theme throughout the deal, and you don't have to give a really long answer, but family is obviously critical to you. You mentioned your wife being a huge part of your story. You mentioned your parents and just kind of the lineage, your great grandfather that started this company. What is it about your world that makes family so important? Like, why is family so important to you?
I think, growing up in a family where, our business, the business was a big part of, I remember when we were kids, my cousins and my brothers and sisters, we would play Vellano Brothers, like that was like our game. We'd like yell at each other and say like, not that that's what my family did, no, but my uncles and my father and everybody, they were all, the business was a big part of how we grew up, but family was a huge part of how I grew, the big Italian Sunday dinners in New York and we were up there a couple of weeks ago and we went and got lemon ice and the lady that I saw last time I saw her was probably 13. She remembered me and remembered my grandmother's name. But growing up in a place like that and really understanding how important, they built a great business and it was generational. But when you start a business on your own, you really have to. I mean, being the wife of an entrepreneur is probably as hard a job as anybody, and coming home and not being able to explain why you did something or not being able to explain like, look, it's just the way it is right now, and it's going to work, and having faith having faith in some of those decisions we've been married for 20 years and she's been a huge supporter I don't know if we would be as successful as we are without her. So, or me.
I love it, man. Well, I know it's a constant theme that most entrepreneurs, it's not easy and it takes an army of support. So, all right, man, I'm going to let you go. This has been awesome. You built a hell of a company and I'm hoping to meet you in person someday. I'm going to be down in Houston here pretty soon, probably in August. So maybe we'll get together.
Yeah, man. Let me know. Love to.
All right, dude.